understand it, and this kind of comes back to the food stuff too, but like Chicago Tribune itself wasn't really having that big a problem. It was that they took on a highly leveraged some real estate operations or something like that. But anyway, they had a high debt ratio that wasn't really caused by their core businesses in newspaper publishing. That really, so the profit problem wasn't newspaper publishing per se, but it was the other business operations that what's his name, that guy that declared bankruptcy kind of took over. And you know, like the New York Times, it said they were going to mortgage their building, right, so that they could, but yet they have like the most hits. I mean, unfortunately, like the New York Times, I like it, I read it, but it's becoming the de facto paper again of record, even more so than it ever used to be because everybody gets it on the internet. So my question is, you know, like the newspaper economics seem like they're not that bad, but everybody says they're awful, you know, so I'm curious about that. And then the other thing radio, I've heard, like in rural areas, you can buy ads like you wouldn't believe for radio. It's really cheap because there's been so many different profit problems there. The last thing I have a question about is, do you guys publish the Daily Yonder blog?
The Center for Rural Strategies does.
Yeah, the Center for Rural Strategies. And I wondered how that, because that's kind of a journalism blog, how that has been working as a way to maybe fill in some of this other.
Well, one thing about the newspaper and their profits, the Knight Ridder was making something like 12% profit, but their shareholders insisted that wasn't good enough. They wanted 20% or something. You know, so it was, yeah, it was a perfectly profitable company, but it was forced by the shareholders to I mean, basically they sold and just went out of business. So, you know, it isn't like that they're not it isn't necessarily that they're not profitable, it's the level of profitability. And it, you know, it does raise these questions, like this is the fourth estate, right, or whatever estate it's supposed to be. I mean, there is a role for the press and for journalism in our democracy. And it, you know, is it going to be a role that's just a, you know, a corporate model? What other, so, you know, people have been talking like, will ultimately we need some kind of publicly financed yet editorially protected journalism programs. I mean, things, you know, there's nothing specific on the table, but it does seem that it would be very dangerous to lose journalism and journalistic reporting. The question, the Daily Yonder is an attempt by the Center for Rural Strategies. One of their goals is to raise the profile of rural issues which were not getting reported regionally or nationally at all, but to raise the profile of these issues with journalists and with policymakers. So they are online reporting, and their primary readership at this point is journalists who are picking up from their reports and then maybe reporting in their you know, hometown papers or whatever. And it's a great source of information, and I recommend it strongly, thedailyyonder.com. The thing about radio is that you know, you all have heard that story about the tanker car that went off the tracks and exploded in Fargo, or was more rural North Dakota, and there were 14 radio stations in that covering that region, and not one of them could announce a warning to the public because they were all satellite programmed. So there was no local, you know, there was nothing local there. So that community was, you know, completely endangered, and here's their communication structure. So, you know, that's kind of the status of commercial radio.
So let me, there was a hand here, then here, then.
Mine's just a real brief ignorance question. What's, compared to like the burbs and cities, what's the internet penetration in rural areas?
It is the lowest in the country.
But, I mean, I don't mean an exact number. I mean, bizarrely, by magnitude lower.
Well, it's like,
Try getting all that.
I think
Enjoy the
49%,
best.
and Yeah, 40%, and then urban areas are
90.
60 or so.
Yeah.
And, I mean, in the policy arena, there are a lot of policy options right now on the table related to the internet, and the stimulus package has, you know, $6 billion or something for expansion of broadband infrastructure, and that would be primarily rural areas, but also urban. But it will really take communities to fight for. There could be options for more internet service to be provided by municipalities, by local entrepreneurs, by communities, and there are examples of that, rather than by AT&T, Verizon, and Time Warner and Comcast. You know, so the policy issues are about, will there be local options? You know, how can communities be part of this stimulus?
Because that's a partial response to the dying newspapers. I mean, it would give people access to something.
Well, I think it's a recognition that really our economy is based on access to the internet. In addition to knowledge and information and medicine, I mean, the economic engine of the country is technology, and in large cases is the internet. And so if you leave communities without it, or it's so, you know, inaccessible or so expensive, then they're really out of the picture.